Lynne Golodner is host of the Make Meaning podcast and founder of the Make Meaning movement. She is also founder of Your People, LLC, a marketing and public relations firm she started in 2007 to bring meaning and purpose to marketing for schools, universities, and municipalities. A 2020 member of the Forbes Agency Council, Lynne Golodner was recognized by Mish Business as a marketing and PR prophet in 2019 and by Crain's Detroit Business as a notable woman in marketing 2018. Author of 8 books, including The Flavors of Faith, Holy Breads, Lynne writes a monthly column on meaning for the Oakland Press. She spent 15 years as a nationally celebrated journalist before becoming an entrepreneur focused on marketing through strategic storytelling, mutually beneficial relationships, and higher purpose. A Fulbright specialist, Lynne is a graduate of the University of Michigan with a BA in Communications and English and Goddard College with an MFA in Writing. She is the mother of 4 teenagers and lives with her family in Huntington Woods, Michigan. Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. So, Lynne, how did you come to your PR career?
It's an interesting journey, Nancy, because I was a journalist for 15 years. And so I was writing for magazines and newspapers all over the country. And everything started changing in, 2007, 2008, when the economy was changing. And journalism, a lot of my main sources of income, magazines that I wrote for all the time, were closing, and freelance budgets were shrinking as well, because I was freelance at that point. And so I decided to pivot and take my communication skills in another direction. And I really didn't think I was setting out to do PR at the beginning. I just thought, I need to find somebody to pay me so that I can raise these kids. And I was going through a life change. I was divorcing my first husband. My kids were 1, 3, and 5. And so with that economy situation, and then, everything was so uncertain, I needed to figure out how I was going to build some stability. And I started working with a grocery company in Metro Detroit. And I really approached it from this storytelling perspective that I had as a journalist, because I had written a lot for food publications and more about the meaning in food and how it's a connector, a community builder. And when I approached this grocery company, we really had a synergy. I started helping the CEO with his blog. I rebuilt their website and wrote all new content for them. And then all of a sudden I was pitching media and doing newsletters and in-store events, and voila, I had a PR career. So I sort of back-ended into it with my journalistic instincts leading the charge, and then trained myself through PRSA and other wonderful programs over the years, so that I actually came to embrace this beautiful career that, sort of bridges PR and marketing, and it all driven by a storytelling perspective.
That's a great story. I love the way that you were able to pivot, as they say, during during the last time when our economy and our world changed. Now, in hindsight, it seems like that was just a minor blip compared to COVID, right?
You're so right. You're so right.
So what I love about your approach is that you have an approach to PR that a higher meaning. And can you tell me about that unique approach and what does it mean that it has a higher meaning?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you asking. So, it's interesting because when I was writing for a living, I didn't realize that this was sort of my mission, but I was really curious about how people found meaning in the mundane, is what I used to say. And so, like, just everyday, ordinary folks doing extraordinary things. And it was this quest that I was on to tell those stories. And so when I started working with companies and nonprofits and entrepreneurs as a publicist and a marketing consultant, I really took that sort of curiosity with me and was wondering how we could make each client that I worked with stand out from the crowd. So what was driving them, more than just profits or a need to make income, but, what was the meaning? What was the deeper story? How did they come to the work that they do? And so that meaning first perspective really drives every client project that I do, and even how I decide to bring on clients. I've only had two clients in 13 years of business who really didn't have like a purpose behind their business. They literally just wanted to make a ton of money. And I wasn't very successful with them because I'm so curious about how people are driven to make a difference with their work. And that's what becomes sort of the shining star of their storytelling and a differentiating aspect that helps us to market them really well. And so most companies, even when they want a really robust bottom line, have a sense of purpose. They really want to make the world better, or they really want to help people in some way. And they're so driven by that. And they believe they can, so they do. So that meaning idea really overshadows everything I do. And it's what inspired me to start podcasting too. And my podcast is called the Make Meaning Podcast. And it was just simply another platform to let that curiosity go wild and understand the story behind the story, why people do what they do.
Well, I totally resonate with the story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things because one of the early PR experiences that I had in my career was when I worked at a ski resort, and there was this man named Paul Shipper who had been an airline pilot, and he had been in a crash, actually taking off. The strut of the plane went into the gas tank, and there was an explosion, and he had to dive out. And he wanted to continue flying, but the airline said, "No, you can't because you've been injured and you're a liability." And so he moved to this ski resort, and he just started skiing every single day. And for like 10 plus years, he never missed a day of skiing. And he was just sort of driven to show that he was still healthy and able, but it got to be the point where like he really couldn't do the skiing anymore. And it was a sad story, but it was like a PR bonanza because we started telling the story in local publications after he had done it like a couple of years, and then went to the Boston Globe, and then we went to Good Morning America, and they sent a crew up to the ski resort. And yeah, so it was, I mean, he was not even a very good skier. He was just a very intermediate skier. But it's exactly what you're talking about, like an ordinary person who did an extraordinary thing, because just making the time and effort to go skiing every day took a lot, because he sometimes had to postpone doctor's appointments or other things to like summertime. So, and what you said about, when you did PR for people that just wanted to make money. I mean, I think journalists are very smart people and they can sniff that out. Like if you're trying to like use them for advertising instead of, buying advertising, they can tell, and journalists do not like to be used, right?
That is so true. And it's funny because I feel like looking back, I was early in my career when each of those clients started to work with me. And I think I took them on for superficial reasons too. Like when you own an agency, you can panic if you don't have enough clients. And I was new to the game and I thought, oh, it's another client, it's more money. So I think I took them for the wrong reasons. And, it was just not a good fit and it did not work. And it was a really big life lesson. So, now I trust my instincts. If I don't think that the client is really purpose driven, I refer them to someone else because it's just not a fit for me. It's somebody else might be able to work magic for them, but I don't think I could. So life lessons, definitely.
Yeah. And of course, when you're in the PR business, it still is business. So believe me, I know what it's like when, you need the business, but you know that it's not right, and, referring it elsewhere and just being confident that another good client will come along.
Definitely. Definitely. Yes.
So, Lynne, what are some easy ways to build exposure for a brand?
There are so many, and I feel like you can get lost by the overwhelming number of options that are out there. And so I feel like a really good place to start is just by understanding your story. And so when I work with a client, we start to build the blocks that we can establish a foundation for narrative storytelling that can then make it easy to do things like social media or blogging or media pitching. I like to start with sort of a big picture perspective and articulate those words, those concepts that are really special and unique about this client. And then we can look at it and say, okay, now we're going to do an editorial calendar. We're going to blog, let's say. And so blogging is a super easy thing to do. And from there, you can pull content from a blog and use it for social media so that you're really maximizing your resources and your time, and you have consistency of message on your different channels. And I love to really look at social media strategy for clients because I think people feel like there's so many social media platforms, so they need to be on all of them, and it becomes very overwhelming, and then they don't do any of them well. And I usually guide people to take baby steps. And so let's pick one, and let's figure out where our audience is, and let's build it really mindfully and get good at it. And then we can add in another. And so really ramping up so that what we're doing has reach, has impact. It's really being done in a meaningful way. And so once you have that sort of editorial calendar and a sense of who you are and the messages you want to put out there, you can then strategically choose the channels to put them in and really pull from the same content so that you're populating those channels really well. So like I said, blog, I said social media, even a monthly newsletter, over email is a great tool, but not all at once. I really think that they need to ease into that messaging and that, audience connection.
Well, of course, I started doing PR before the advent of the commercial internet. So back in those days, we relied so much more on the media, and, we were kind of at the mercy of journalists. And now, because of all the choices on the internet, we don't have to depend totally on journalists to deem our story newsworthy or not. And that's one of the things I love about PR today is content creation, like you said. And I totally agree that it's better to choose your platforms and do fewer platforms on social media well, rather than spreading yourself too thin and just being, because each platform I think of it like a different sort of social club, like the way you do Instagram is so much different from the way you do Facebook, from Twitter and Pinterest and LinkedIn. Each thing kind of has its own rules and ethics and vibe, right? I mean, it's all different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's interesting because, going back to that first client, the grocery company, that was when Facebook was really getting big. And so I remember a lot of early clients would come to me and be like, just get me on Facebook and that'll build my business. And I'm like, well, I can do that, but I don't think that's your only answer. This is a philosophy I developed from day one that I carry through to today. And it's never more important than now, is that we have to be face to face as much as we are distantly connected. And so with the grocery company, I planned, special events in the store. It was a company that had, gluten-free items before you could find them anywhere, and special ethnic foods that you couldn't find anywhere. And there were just really interesting little niches. And so we would do food tastings and events and fairs on weekends to just sort of help people to linger a little longer in the store and connect with vendors, or with even the store owner. Would just walk up and down the aisles and, talk with people. And those personal connections built that brand. It was a family company that had been around for 3 generations. And so we could extend the brand in the digital sphere, but that face-to-face still matters. And even today when, we're in a pandemic and we can't necessarily be as close personally as we want to, we still need in some way to have human connection. And so I feel like we can't lose that as we immerse in the digital channels. We have to also remember that there's a balance, that face-to-face needs to happen too.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's really the premise of this PR Maven podcast, is that we need to always strive to meet someone face to face. Like you and I today are meeting for the first time, and we're not in the same space, but I feel like someday it would be great if we could meet face to face, because I think we have so much in common. And also I think if you meet somebody in person, then I always try to connect right off on LinkedIn or Facebook or some way that you can extend the relationship electronically, but always be striving to get back face to face, because that's really where I think the magic happens between two people, is when you're in the same place and space. There's like those happy hormones that pass between the two of you, the serotonin and dopamine and all those feel-good hormones that make relationships meaningful. And when you talk about a brand having a network or a tribe of fans built on personal relationships, that's so true, because if a customer has met the people behind a brand, that really gives them something to talk about, and that makes them brand ambassadors. So I can see how that's been part of your strategy with your clients.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things that, we're seeing now is that, we need to understand one another, and we can only do that when we see the humanity in other people. We're in a pretty divided time. And one of my clients actually is this, it's called the Civility Project, and they work on building civility. And so, of course, it all started with face-to-face events, and then the pandemic happened. So we've been doing Zoom events, which have still been really successful. But that one of the things that keeps coming up again and again is that you can't hate somebody you're sitting across from. And so it's not only a brand building exercise, but it's sort of life-saving. Like in this day and age, when we see all these divisions, we realize that being face-to-face with people and really connecting is super important. Like, we just can't underestimate how powerful it is.
That makes me think of our United States Senator from Maine, Senator Angus King. And when he's in Washington, D.C., he is always endeavoring to bring together Republicans and Democrats to eat barbecue. Actually, he gets takeout barbecue and invites them over to his place. And he says, once you know, like, your other senators' kids' names and what they do for sports or academics, he goes, then you can't, as you said, you can't hate them. They might have differing opinions, but I feel like the way he works with people from different political parties is the reason that he's been successful, kind of reaching across the aisle. So I absolutely believe that getting to know someone and their life story, and, even people who are criminals, they probably have had a tough life that led them to make bad choices.
I know, it's really, really true. My in-laws, my husband grew up in D.C., Washington, D.C., and my in-laws were very actively involved in the whole, Washington, D.C. landscape and politics and activism. And my husband will say he remembers from his childhood stories of people meeting across the aisle, having dinner, having lunch. They were friends. And I feel like that's when we're at our best, when we can really understand and listen to one another, even if we don't agree. But we do see that humanity, and we do connect as people, and then I think we can do anything.
I agree. And I think we need a lot more of that right now.
I totally agree. Totally.
So, Lynne, you focus on storytelling, relationships, and higher purpose in all of your PR and marketing campaigns. What are the steps that you take to build a brand and a campaign?
That's a great question, Nancy. And it's funny because I'm working with a client right now building his brand. And so I'm knee deep in it at the moment. So it's a great time to answer that. We begin by really asking a lot of questions. And so I love those brainstorming meetings with clients. And trying to understand what's behind their work, what they love about it, what their unique talents are, their vision for how they're going to change the world through the work they do. And then, we sort of build that into a narrative, what I call a foundational narrative. And that's usually anywhere from 5 to 10 paragraphs. That is the anchor content from which everything else comes. And we also do, establish a mission statement, a vision statement, taglines, sometimes core values for a business, just articulating what their unique value proposition is. We put all this content together, in a boilerplate that we can use on marketing materials and press releases. And then from there, we build the strategy. And so once we know who they are, we know who their audience is, we know what they want to do, we can start to create a roadmap of different activities we're going to do to get them out there and building those relationships. So the story comes first and the relationships are second. I say higher purpose third, but really I think that predates everything because that purpose drives the story. And so even though it makes a nice flow to put it third, it really comes first and it's really subtle. But those relationships are virtual and literal. So once we know who you are and who your audience is, it's a matter of coming together and how do we find them? How do we, emphasize mutual benefit? That's a big thing I talk about with clients is, it's not just what's in it for you. There's got to be a mutual benefit. And we take that approach with media relations too, because, we're not just saying, hey, journalist, give us some exposure. We want there to be benefit for the journalist as well. And I explain that to clients early on that mutual benefit is important in every step of PR marketing. And so we have to make sure that we understand we're getting something, but what are we giving to somebody else? And be mindful of that and show that gratitude as well.
Well, that reminds me of that radio station, WIIFM, which is what's in it for me. And that's what people are always going to be asking.
That's so cool.
You haven't heard that one before?
I hadn't. You just made my day. That's so cool.
Well, you're free to use that because I didn't make it up, but it's something I've known about for a long time.
Thank you.
So, Lynne, how do you empower people to do their own PR whenever possible? And that seems a little contrary for a PR professional. But
it's interesting. I mean, I've always maintained a small company. I don't want it to be big. I don't want to have this huge monolith to manage. I like working with the clients and I like being in the trenches. Like I like making social media graphics. There's something about some of the tasks that I really enjoy. And so it's always been my mission to work with a select handful of really great clients. And then early on, I really understood that everybody needs PR and not everybody can or should pay a fortune for it. And so I was fascinated by this question of how do we make PR accessible for people who don't have budgets? Because they still need it. It's just, how do we do it without underselling ourselves? And so I've done a lot of courses and workshops where I'm teaching people little bits that they can do themselves. Now, they can't do it to the extent that we can as an agency, but it's better than nothing. And if they really don't have a budget, it wouldn't be somebody we would take on anyway. And so why not give them some skills to be able to at least build their brand footprint? And so, like, for example, I work with a lot of schools and universities, and I'm very passionate about Waldorf education. One of my kids attended a Waldorf school for about 6 years, and they're incredible schools. They're all over the world, and they're very grassroots. They don't have a huge budget. And so I've had a number of Waldorf schools as clients, but most can't afford a retainer. And so I created a course, Waldorf Marketing Immersion course, and it's a few months long. And I sort of do live trainings where I teach them the process of marketing and help them to audit their marketing, to create their strategy, to learn how to use different channels. And I sort of coach them through it and then wish them well. Now, some of them do become clients in some way, but they can then afford to hire me for one aspect and they can do other things themselves. And I think that's a win-win because just the reality is not everybody can pay an agency to support them. So why not give them the skills? And we're making money on the course, but it's really beautiful to see people fly with these new skills and be able to get their school out there a little more than they could before.
I think that's awesome that you created a course, and I'm sure that all the Waldorf people are so appreciative because it seems, like that was created just for them and it's totally targeted. So good for you. I'm sure that they really appreciate that. Well, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back with more with our conversation with Lynne shortly. But I first want to tell you about my new book, which I wrote called Grow Your Audience, Grow Your Brand, which is available now on Amazon.com as a paperback or Kindle edition. And soon we will have an Audible edition as well that I read at the Portland Pod here in Portland, Maine. The book includes actionable advice on growing a network and growing a brand of raving fans by taking care of your audience, just like Lynne has done and what she's talking about today. So we'll be giving away a free Kindle version if you go to prmaven.com/giveaway. And we'll be back with more from Lynne Golodner in just a moment.
Do you want to grow your client or customer base? Perhaps increase brand awareness? Maybe tell your unique story more effectively? Of course you do. But you may be worried that you don't have enough expertise to make that happen. Well, no worries, PR Maven Nation. Let the PR Maven herself, Nancy Marshall, show you how easy it is to get your message across effectively using a powerful yet simple tool, a message map. Nancy's training is often called informative and constructive, well-designed and impactful, with a perfect blend of theory and real-life experience. You will leverage Nancy's expertise to create your own message map when you register for this comprehensive online video training course, which is broken down into 4 easy-to-understand modules. Normally, this course is priced at $147, but for listeners of the PR Maven podcast, that's you, PR Maven Nation, it's only $29 when you enter the code word podcast during enrollment. It even includes a workbook and bonus content to guide you through the process. So go to prmaven.com and click on the Message Map Mastery course to enroll today. Remember, enter the word podcast during enrollment for a special discounted price of $29.
Welcome back. And today we're talking with Lynne Golodner, owner and chief creative officer at Your People LLC. And I want to dive right back in with more questions. Lynne, how do you create a collaborative approach with your clients?
It's interesting, Nancy. I feel like I'm part of their business, even though I'm not. And I think it's a nice synergy because I can retain that objective perspective of an outsider, but I can know intimately their language, their goals, their hopes and dreams. And I think that defines the collaborative approach. So we really work hand in hand. I come to them as the expert and the consultant and make recommendations. And then it's a partnership toward implementation. So we're brainstorming together. They may be providing information and research and resources, and then we are facilitating it. But it really is a hand-in-hand approach. And I think that there's a benefit to that. Over the years, I've been invited to holiday parties for staff and employees of my different clients. And I always feel a little funny because I'm so touched that they want me to be there. But I remember that I don't work for the company. I am their PR consultant. And but I think it's a testament to how closely we do work that the invitation is extended. And then, when a client finishes working with us, sometimes it feels like a loss because we've been so intimately connected for so many years that it's like leaving behind a trusted friend. So I think that's where the collaboration comes in.
I know exactly what you're talking about because that's one of the things that I love so much about the profession is just becoming part of sort of the family of a certain company and feeling like you're part of their brand network. So I know I felt that way with Sugarloaf, which was a ski resort where I actually was the director of communications, and then they were actually my first client. And today they're not a client, but I'm still very, very involved. And I feel like it's kind of part of my DNA. It's like part of who I am. So I love that. I love that. Yeah. So, Lynne, I have seen many changes in PR and marketing in the course of my career. What changes have you seen, and how has that impacted the way you work?
Well, I think media has changed drastically. So even from when I started to now, so many of my journalist friends are no longer journalists because of cuts at different newspapers and magazines and TV stations. Fewer journalists doing more and getting paid less. So the state of the media is really upsetting to me as a former journalist. And then a lot of those journalists go into PR. So I kind of wonder how many PR people there are in this world today. But that's been a big change. Obviously, social media, and it's ever evolving. And like I said earlier, I started when Facebook was becoming big, and now there's Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, and so many things have come since then that it's just hard to imagine that there weren't all these options before. And people are making personal decisions, purchasing transactions on social media. And so it's really important to know exactly what you're doing there as one tool in your toolbox, but not let it overtake you. And I also think that, one thing that hasn't changed that I don't know how you feel about this, Nancy, but I have a love-hate relationship with media relations. I love when I can have a client be on TV or radio or in the newspaper or something. It feels really satisfying, but clients tend to love media outlets. They just love being on TV, and they think that that's the end all be all, but they don't realize it's probably the least likely way that they're going to drive business. And so, what I've constantly been teaching clients is relationship building is key to long-term business loyalty. And so having a TV segment is a great boost temporarily, but you have to be doing things every single day to build business. And so that TV can't be all the time. It can't, it is like a high that they get when they're on TV that can be addictive. And that makes it really hard for the publicist because there's only so many spots you can book them for. So I don't know if you find that, but that's definitely something that hasn't changed yet.
Yeah. Well, I've always looked at being on TV and in the newspaper and on radio and even on podcasts. It's all part of like the heartbeat of a brand. And you just need to show up in a lot of different places and, show the public that your heart is still beating. So, I try to convince my clients that, yeah, TV is part of the mix, but there are so many other options. And also when you're not appearing in the media, you do your own content, which I know that that's something that you do a lot of as well. So I guess it's part of educating clients, but absolutely, I have a new client and we were able to land a TV segment for them, luckily, like within the first few days of working with them. And yeah, like they went crazy. They loved it. And, everybody on the board of directors was on a high because they're like, yes, this is so awesome. So like you said, there's only, 2 more TV stations in our market to hit. And then we're going to have to start going to alternative sources of media.
Well, it's true because, that's something that clients need to realize is that when you do that, when you get a TV segment right in the first few days, you set the bar super high. And how can you keep exceeding that? You know what I mean? And there's only so much to go around in most markets. Most people are not in New York and LA, and they may have a couple TV stations. And then once they've been on it, they can't for a few months, they can't be greedy. So it's important to train clients. Really
right,
is.
Exactly. And then of course, there's sometimes people think you can get them on the Today Show or CBS Morning News or Good Morning America. And, sometimes we can do that, but it's a tough pitch because those people are being pitched every day. I know I had a client at the beginning of COVID who wanted to be featured by that Stephanie Rule, who's reporting on like banking and finance on the Today Show and the NBC Nightly News. And I was able to make a connection with her producer, but I didn't have just the right angle, unfortunately. So I'm glad we brought that up because that's a good reminder. I need to reach out to that producer again. But isn't it great, like when you email a producer and they actually respond? It's like, oh
Yes,
my
it's great. It's like, it's an emotional roller coaster as the publicist. I don't know if you feel this, but it's like when somebody responds right away, you're like, yes. And when they don't, you're like sweating it out at your desk, even though you've booked millions of people before. And this one is like redefining your sense of, can I do this? And then finally somebody responds and you're like, thank God.
Yeah, I know. I know. And
Yes.
I constantly tell clients and my friends and stuff, this never gets easy. I've been doing PR. I think it's now like, I hate to say it because it's going to age me, but it's like almost 40 years. and it
Wow.
never gets easy. It's like, why didn't I choose a career that would get easy? But I love it. I love it. And actually, Twitter,
awesome.
Twitter is my secret weapon for connecting with journalists because most journalists are on Twitter. And if you can start following them and, liking things that they tweet about and then kind of go in for the pitch after you've made a connection, I have found that to be really effective.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that completely.
So, Lynne, personal branding is kind of a new aspect of PR that I know I've been working on. How have you built your own personal brand? Because you have produced a ton of content, including 8 books.
Yes. So I am a writer first and foremost. That's my first love and true love. And actually, book number 9 is coming out in February 2021. And it's about the Make Meaning Matrix and how you can find your meaning and then work from a place of purpose. And so the Make Meaning podcast really expanded into a movement. And this book is about that. So it's already in the publisher's hands. And I'm really excited about that. As a personal brand, I just sort of do what I do. I write and I speak out on things that are important to me, and I'm really thoughtful. And I always like to ask why. And I'm pretty vocal about things. And so I've done a lot of speaking. I do a lot of workshops and seminars. I have both my personal social media as well as my company. And I'm probably more active on the personal one because I like to show that mix of PR and marketing, writing, being a mom, all of those things I think make my personal brand. And ultimately for me, it comes down to the words. And so I just really am careful about, choosing the right words, seeing things in a poetic lens and sharing that with the world. And I think that embodies what I stand for. I do think the podcast I started in 2018 has been a brand builder. And that was the intention. I intended to start it as a way of becoming a marketing tool for my company. It has become a labor of love. I really love doing it, but it also is expanding my reach and building new relationships for me that lead to different avenues of work. So I think podcasts really are a great tool for personal branding. It's just a great way to put yourself out there and connect with others.
Well, I couldn't agree more because I started my podcast in 2018 as well. And talk about a labor of love. I feel like it has opened up so many avenues. And I just love being able to have a conversation with someone like you who I haven't met before, but we have so much in common. And to me, it's just so exciting. And then, like I said before, I have plans to try to meet people eventually when we're able to travel again and meet in person. So I'll look forward to trying to meet you at some point too.
That sounds great. I look forward to it, Nancy.
So speaking of which, how has COVID-19 changed the way that you're working now?
Well, I always worked from home. I had an office for a short time early in my PR career and then decided to move back to working from home because I just like that. And that's why I started working for myself in 1998, actually. And so I like that freedom. I like the non-traditional workspace. And so I already had all these tools set up. Like I already use Zoom because I have clients all over North America. And so we needed Zoom to connect with them. So that was something that I knew very well. And I have to say, this sounds really terrible, but I'm not pleased that there's a pandemic, but I have appreciated some of the benefits in my life. So for one, I was at home in the spring with my kids, and it was so precious. I loved being here with them. We spent really good time together, cooking and baking, playing games, just talking more. My daughter and I would take walks every night, and she did most of the talking. And it was just so amazing. And I don't think we would have done that. I had a graduating senior, I had a graduating eighth grader. We had a spring schedule that was so bursting at the seams, and everything halted with the pandemic. And I'm sad for them that those rites of passage didn't happen, but I do really appreciate the time that we've had together. And also with my work, one of the benefits of this pandemic, and I have lost some clients, so it hasn't all been easy, but I have been able to focus more on the work than on racing to meetings. And so, there are clients that were 45 minutes away that I used to, drive and meet with them. And that was my day, because getting there and getting back took so much time. And so now when we meet over Zoom, and then I can get the work done. And so I've been really grateful for that too. I think that I've paid more attention to the quality of the work because I've had the time to. And so that made me really reflect. I hope I'll be able to take that forward as hopefully we go back to normal sometime soon.
Sometimes you're saying things and I feel like I could be saying exactly the same thing. I feel exactly the same way. COVID-19, I'm very sorry that there's been people who have been sick, and so many businesses have been negatively impacted and people have died, and it has been a horrible thing. However, there has definitely been a silver lining for me, and I've been able to kind of slow down and look at my life and kind of get organized too. And my team, I have a team of 7 people, and everybody just switched to working remotely very seamlessly, and it hasn't really impacted anything. So we still do have an office, but I'm not sure how much longer that's going to stay open, because I think everybody's working from home really well.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So Lynne, is there a book, an app, or a website that you have found especially helpful, and why?
Well, it's going to be kind of one that you wouldn't expect. But there's a book called Governing Business and Relationships that was written by an Indian Swami, Swami Parthasarathi, and I can send you that to put in the show notes. But it's called Governing Business and Relationships, and it is a wonderful guide for sort of philosophically grounding yourself and your approach to work. And the other thing that I would recommend is there's a series of books put out by Zingerman's, which is one of my favorite businesses in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm very good friends with the owners. Paul Saginaw, one of the founders, is a personal friend and mentor of mine. And there's a book that his partner, Ari Weinzweig, wrote called A Lapsed Anarchist's Approach to Building a Great Business. And so those 2 books, I think, have been super helpful. And then I want to mention one more, if you don't mind, but I just finished it. It's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And it was really fascinating because it sort of helped me clarify. He talks about working in your zone of genius and how you can do that. And I wasn't sure what mine was. And so it was a really nice little journey that I went on to figure out, what should I be focusing on and what should I be giving to other people. So all 3 of those are really great books.
Those sound like great recommendations, and that Big Leap by Gay Hendricks sounds like one that I would really like to read. So thank you for those recommendations. And I don't know about you, but I feel like when I read a book that gives me new energy and a new attitude and insights into my profession and my career, that's what puts gas in my tank.
That's great. That's awesome.
So how can members of PR Maven Nation get in touch with you if they want to follow up and connect?
Sure. Well, check out my websites. The first one is yourppl.com for our PR business, Your People. And then makemeaning.org is where the podcast and the movement live. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and I would love to connect with anybody there. Tell me that you heard me on this podcast. And check out, my Make Meaning podcast. It's on all the podcast channels, and hope that you'll give it a listen. And you can email me from either website, and I'd love to hear from people.
Well, I'm so glad to connect with you myself, and I look forward to keeping the relationship going. And I want to thank you for joining me and members of PR Maven Nation today. And I look forward to, keeping it going. And I'd love to come on your podcast sometime as well.
Sounds like a plan. We will get you booked in, Nancy. I look forward to it.
All right, Lynn. Well, thank you. And I want to thank everyone in PR Maven Nation for joining me today and listening to this wonderful conversation with someone who is cut from the same cloth as a PR professional. So thanks, Lynn, and have a great day. That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.